Thank you very much for joining today. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Kelly Weger. I am a registered architect and a LEED accredited professional. I'm with Purdue Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And I'm very excited to be your keynote speaker here today. And we're going to be talking a little bit about risk in business. I hope that you'll find this session informative and insightful for you. So as you all know, right now we are in a very unique climate. It's stressful times, generally speaking, and it can be challenging to be a person in the sustainability industry right now. Across the country, there's a lot of stuff going on across the globe as well. But here in Indiana, actually, when I turn in my annual CEUs, I'm expecting to get a free sample of Prozac to all people who are registering and submitting those. Thankfully, here in Indiana, we have a lot of history, a lot of fortitude, and a lot of strength. I know that a lot of you have been doing this hard work for a number of years in the industry. So show of hands, how many have you been doing environmental work or sustainability work for 10 years or longer? Awesome. And show of hands, who here doesn't yet know how to raise your hand virtually? Oh, shucks. Yeah, I believe me, I get it. I mean, we've only been experiencing this virtual stuff for a few months. So no worries, I totally get it. I hope that you'll find this interactive, even though it's a little bit different doing this virtually. So one of the things that I am excited about is I love the community that we have here. Like you, I know that it's a really unique opportunity to get together and talk to folks who really understand what we do. Certainly sustainability field can be lonely work. There are a lot of folks that really don't get what we do. I know for me, I'm the only sustainability person at my office, and I'm pretty sure my coworkers don't really know what I do. I think that there's a little bit of, Kelly, she does a great job at her job. I'm sure that by now she's probably saved a dozen wombats. So yeah, believe me, I get it. It's the sense of community is an important part of why we're excited to come to stuff like this. So I really do look forward, and I really do thank the Indiana Environmental Conference for putting this together. It's something I look forward to every year. There's a lot of you that I only get to see when we come to this conference together. So I'm really excited to at least be virtually together this year. And the conference always gives me an opportunity to find, my passion again, to get inspired, to be reinvigorated, rejuvenated, hopefully a little bit restored, so that we can get back out there the rest of the year and do the good work that we're doing. Or at the very least, we can commiserate with each other about how nobody understands what we do, right? So we know that we've got some difficult times ahead. As I was preparing for this keynote, I was given a copy of the agenda. I was very excited to see what some of the different opportunities we would have for different sessions throughout the conference. And there was one that I saw on, I think it was the advantages of solar during times of COVID. And there was another one that was something about, the next chapter of the EPA in a post-COVID world. And I'm really looking forward to the one on finding your joy during a global dumpster fire. And that's kind of how it feels sometimes. There's a little bit of doom and gloom. We know that there's a lot of stuff going on. And certainly this has been a challenging year. We have record wildfires out west. We have a number of hurricanes that have been hitting a lot of our sister states. And here in the Midwest, we're thankfully pretty lucky. We're pretty insulated from some of that stuff. However, we're not immune to some of the impacts from climate change and what's going on around the globe. For example, in Aurora, Indiana, unfortunately, the last couple of years, they've had major flood events. They had a 56-foot flood last year, and it caused the local gas station to be closed for 3 months while they recovered from this. So climate change impacts are not something that don't hit us here. That's part of why we do what we do. Another example, in Orange, Indiana, this is not a climate change example, but it is an issue of environmentalism and sustainability, which is that we had, unfortunately, an event where there was a chemical spill and cyanide and ammonia were leaked out. They ended up going into the Little Calumet River, and the national park was forced to close a lot of the beaches because of hundreds of dead fish. Over 3,000 fish were killed in this event. This is just one example. We also know that we've had an excessively dry year. We've had a number of excessively dry years in a row, unfortunately. And we've also experienced record rainfall, sometimes in the same year. And we know that this drought has impacted a lot of farmers, which you may not be a farmer, but certainly we're all tied together. This absolutely impacts the state of Indiana, our economy, and a lot of the people that we are connected to one way or another. So when we have these excessive droughts, it means that this year, June was a very unusually dry June, and it's continued to be very dry into this fall. And that means that the corn crops, a lot of them died. A lot of them had stunted root growth. They had smaller than average size ears of corn, which means that they have less crop to pay the bills. And we're all suffering one way or another this year. So this is on top of the other things that we're dealing with. If you're more interested in something, recreational and fun, certainly we see here an example where the lake water was so low that a lot of these docks for recreation were simply unusable. And so we know that there's just a few examples of some of the ways that these impact us. Thankfully, we know that we are resilient here. I could just stop and leave you with all of the doom and gloom part of sustainability and just go collect my referral fee from Eli Lilly's antidepressant department. But I would rather remind you of all of the opportunities that we have, even though we're facing a lot of struggles. So we Hoosiers are resilient people. We hope we have so much to be grateful for. And some of the things that inspire me include the nature that we have that abounds around us. I certainly appreciate being able to go hiking and seeing waterfalls, enjoying nature, wildlife. And these are things that are very restorative, and especially in a time like now, this is critical to help us to relieve some of the stress, to deal and cope with what all we have going on. So whether you like to go hiking, whether you like to go fishing, what is it about our natural resources that you love, that you want to protect? What is your motivation for what you do? We have a lot of different reasons and a lot of different potential drivers individually. So maybe you just believe in stewardship, or you want to protect our resources for the next generation. Maybe you're concerned about safety for your family and having good air quality and knowing that drinking water is safe, not polluted. Maybe it's a sense of duty or beauty, or the mental health benefits of it. Or maybe it's just you want to have some fun, get out there and enjoy. Whatever it is, I want you to be reminded of that and let that fuel your passion so that we can move forward and do some great stuff. Now, those are our personal drivers, but what about your companies? They may have some of the same drivers. In most cases, what motivates a company is a little bit different. And so we need to make sure that we understand what drives companies so that we can help sell and push our environmental and sustainability projects forward in a way that's mutually beneficial. So for companies, it may be something like waste reduction. Could be, purchasing costs that they're concerned about. They might want to be working on pollution prevention. Maybe they have high remediation costs and they're looking to cut those down. Or they're concerned about accidents and trying to make sure that the plant is safer, which would help reduce insurance costs. And you would have healthier and happier staff. It's a great motivator, which helps with employee retention. And that also might help you with market growth and increase sales. So whatever your company motivators are, we can use that to our advantage as we start figuring out how we do better and do more during these very challenging times in the world of sustainability. So before I go further, I want to redefine and make sure we're all on the same page as far as what sustainability is. If you look it up in the dictionary, it's a pretty simple definition: being able to last for a long time. I don't know about you, but I certainly would love for my personal existence to be able to last for a long time. I would like for my company to last for a long time. So it's a pretty easy concept to get behind. In the world of sustainability, we refer to this as the definition, which is, again, pretty simple. It's truly how do we achieve what we need to today without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same thing, to allow them the same opportunities to live a good and holistic, sustainable life. There's another definition that I want to share with you. This comes from the Constitution of the Iroquois Nation. And this one is a little bit further off in the distance, which is for every decision we make today, we need to be thinking about how this impacts 7 generations down the line. That is a really deep, deep, deep sustainability goal. And a lot of us can't even fathom getting that far ahead. That's okay. I'm just asking you, between these 3 definitions, so to find a spot that feels comfortable to you, that's what I think about when I try and explain sustainability to somebody else. So unfortunately, a lot of folks think sustainability is this, which is a common misperception. I encountered this a lot when I first started doing what I do here. And a lot of people think, well, sustainability, that just means you want me to flush my money down the toilet so we can save the planet. That is incorrect. That is not what true sustainability means. Instead, sustainability is the equal balance between people, planet, and profit. That doesn't mean that any one of those should be overwhelming the others and some of them get ignored. They have to be balanced. And the reason why is because we truly cannot have a sustainable company if we don't keep those 3 in check. For example, historically, after the Industrial Revolution, most companies were focused on profit, bottom line. If they did so, they could do well, they could last for a while. But if you'll notice today, all of the major international corporations are paying attention to sustainability because they recognize they cannot continue to make the money that they made before without keeping in check the environment and the people. If they're just ignoring their employees and disregarding their community needs and polluting in their backyard, that is going to catch up with them. And usually it costs a lot more to clean up than it does to prevent it. So that's not sustainable. Likewise, you can actually have a company that is very focused on the environment, doing really awesome stuff, but if they can't make enough income to cover their costs, they're not sustainable either. Same goes with people. You can't ignore your employees or ignore your community and expect that they're going to stick around and support you to be sustainable in the long term. So it truly is all 3 of these, which create what we now refer to as the triple bottom line. And all companies today need to be thinking about the triple bottom line if they want to be successful in the long run. So if we think about that last P, which is people, this is actually one that gets the least attention. But it is really valuable because labor is typically the first biggest cost for most companies. And if we're ignoring that, we're ignoring a lot of awesome opportunities. So when we think about that, companies that have sustainability goals are able to have happier employees, higher employee retention, better recruitment, reduced turnover, reduced sick time, all sorts of things that just ask your HR department. They cost a lot of money. So it is really important. If we're able to achieve all of these positives on the people side, that means that we're able to save a lot of time and money by keeping employees healthy and happy. So if you look at this a little bit further, and nowadays there are tons of studies supporting all of these. Here's just a couple examples. Companies that have more rigorous environmental standards, they end up having, on average, 16% higher labor productivity. Now, if you could walk out onto your plant floor and say, hey, let's just be 5% more productive today, what would those numbers look like? They're pretty awesome, right? That would be a really, really great day. You would get a raise. So if you can find these kind of amazing results through sustainability, there's something there. There's something pretty exciting there. Another example, workers that have a space where they have a view and daylight perform 20% better, 10 to 25%, on tests of mental function and memory recall. So if you want folks to be able to focus on the work that they're doing, that's a really great thing. So that ties into the higher productivity, right? So now I want to help you connect the dots. We're going to talk through a few examples of really simple opportunities that you might encounter on a regular basis. And instead of just looking shallowly at what's obvious, I want to drill down so that you can start to understand all of the really amazing opportunities and benefits that come from what may originally look like a risk. So here's the first example. we've got, walking down the floor, we see a small wet spot. You could be inclined to just, ask somebody to clean it up, keep walking, ignore it. But if you stop and you start asking some questions, do a little root cause analysis, then we'll find, maybe that was coming from an ongoing leak from a piece of equipment. Okay, well, that's probably not good. If we look at that leak is probably getting mopped up and it's contaminating your mop water. So now the city suddenly starts calling you and saying, hey, we've got some issues with the wastewater that you're sending us. And now we have to start treating our wastewater as a hazardous material or treat it somehow on site. That means that we're increasing our annual disposal costs. So that's money right there that could have been saved if we had started looking at what the cause was. Let's take that a little bit further. If we have that issue as a result of a leak from equipment, that is not good for the equipment. So then we can start to have problems where if the equipment breaks down, now we could have a key piece of the production that is offline, which means we've got a backlog. We have a backlog, we might be missing deadlines, we miss deadlines, we lose customers. That costs money, I'll tell you that. And what about that employee? What if we have somebody who slips and falls? Obviously that is a very, very unfortunate thing to have happen. If that employee gets injured, that should be enough for us to consider changing right there. If we have a workman's comp claim, that could be an issue. And that could lead to increased insurance premiums, which again, costs money. So I want to take this to the next level. This is actually a real life example here in Indiana from a company that I worked with in Franklin. And they came to me because they were looking to find some innovative new ways that they could save money. They were thinking that maybe sustainability would offer something that they hadn't looked at yet. They've already done lean manufacturing, they've already done Six Sigma, they're very familiar with a lot of these tools. They just wanted to take it to the next step. So when I met them, they were consuming 13,000 gallons of soap. It was a pH of 14. And they were, because that soap wasn't able to deal with some of the issues that they had on their floor, because they did have equipment leaking that they basically decided didn't make sense to fix, a whole different issue. But they were mopping up all of this other material, and it caused their mop water to be contaminated in a way that required them to treat it as hazardous material. So they ended up having some concerns, and they wanted to find ways to treat that on site as much as they could and get rid of it. But they were sending 82,000 gallons of wastewater back to the city with issues, and some of it was going to hazardous company. So in addition to that, there certainly was a very real risk of slip and fall, and even a risk of chemical burn because of the high pH of the soap. So there were a number of issues here. So we started to look into it. Before I actually got to them, they had already implemented one solution a few years prior, which was that they installed a massive industrial evaporator. So we're sending a bunch of very, very expensive water to a company that's hauling it off as hazardous material. How about we reduce the volume and, evaporate a lot of the water off and turn it into a sludge? So that did work. They were actually able to reduce the water content to about 20% of the previous volume. They were still paying to dispose of what was now sludge instead of just water for about $13,000. But they were still dumping the rest of the water down the drain and paying the city $51,000 for the privilege to do so. What they didn't factor in was the cost of running this gas-powered evaporator. This thing ran 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. And every 25 hours, they had to turn it off and have a crew clean that thing out for about an hour and then bring it back online. So there was a very significant amount of investment, maintenance, energy that went into running this evaporator they had never calculated. And with the energy alone, once we started looking at it, we realized pretty quickly it was costing them $43,000 a year to run this machine. So we said, maybe there's a better way. Let's just look together. So ultimately, we collaborated. We did a training with them so that their team could all pool their knowledge and skills and resources. And what we ended up finding was that by switching over to a new soap They could get one that had a pH of 7. It reacted differently with what was in the water so that they were able to now, it would float and they could skim that hydraulic oil off the top. Being able to do that meant that the remaining water was perfectly safe, and they were able to recycle that gray water for mopping. So instead of buying drinkable water every time you mop the floors, they could recycle it up to 3 times. That saved them money buying water, that saved them money sending water back to the city. So it was actually a really, really huge cost savings, surprisingly, just on water, which we usually think of as being fairly cheap here in Indiana. Initially, the new soap ended up being actually a much cheaper option. They found something that was much more concentrated, and then they would dilute it at a ratio on site of 50-1. So that alone saved them $38,000 just in the soap. So that was pretty awesome. $43,000 in the energy savings once we decommissioned the evaporator. That went bye-bye. And they were actually able to sell the hydraulic oil that they were able to skim off the top. So they had, instead of spending $12,000, they started generating $4,000. Pretty awesome. So this was really cool, and additionally, they were fine-tuning. They had some on-site water treatment, so they were fine-tuning that, and they were able to actually find an additional $15,000 in savings with getting that chemistry just perfect on-site. So it was a really awesome, successful project. All we did was look at their mop water, and they ended up having, a huge savings, total of $133,000 in savings. So it was a great project. So let's look at another risk. I'm sure you've seen something like this before. I often walk through plants and find uninsulated pipes that are carrying either hot water or steam. So we know that this means that they're wasting energy, which means that they've got higher utility costs. If you're already paying more in utility costs, when those costs increase, which they usually don't go down, so when they increase, that means that it has a bigger impact on them as a company. This is also something that's potentially a burn hazard. If those pipes are hot, we have potential for leaks that could occur there. And there could be equipment damage if we have something that is relying on that water or steam to be a specific temperature, and if you're losing too much of that heat because it's uninsulated. And it could even be something that is a violation on their ISO 14001 or 50001 audit. So that could be another potential risk when we see this. Now, by approaching this and seeing opportunity, we're able to reduce utility costs when we insulate this. We're able to reduce the impact of what happens when our utility rates rise. Certainly we know that this is safer for everyone that's working around this. And it's well maintained, so we have fewer maintenance costs potentially. We don't have downtime if we have an equipment failure, and we're passing our audits. So it's a win-win-win. Let's look at another example. So if we think about our supply chain, certainly a lot of companies are dealing with an international supply chain, and this has been pretty challenging. I know everyone around here was certainly hit with some of the delays as COVID-19 was affecting supply chain, and we want to make sure that we're prepared for the next big thing. So we know that anything that's international is going to probably have a ripple effect. We know also that anything that's international is going to have higher carbon emissions because it's getting shipped overseas over a long distance. And also, as we know that climate change is increasing the prevalence and the intensity of major storm events, those are more of a risk than they used to be. So if there is a hurricane or a tsunami or something like that that impacts your supply chain, that's going to impact you, right? So that's a very big concern. If we have delays in shipping due to some sort of an emergency elsewhere, that ultimately means that we could have possibly some damage to our goods. At the very least, we might have a production backlog as we're waiting on our supplies. And if we have too much of a production backlog, we lose clients and we go out of business. And nobody wants that. So how do we find a better way to do this? Certainly we can look at backup suppliers. So let's find somebody just in case. Who are those critical suppliers that we could not do what we do? So taking a little bit of a step back to think about this. If we find locally sourced options, now those might not be always the cheapest, but if we are at least researching them, we have them as backup suppliers, when something does happen, we at least know who to call. So certainly stopping production is way more expensive than paying a couple of pennies extra for one particular piece part from one supplier versus another. It also means that we're prepared for that worst case scenario. So we're able to minimize that impact, and we're able to keep our on-time production, which is absolutely critical so that we can beat the competition and continue to get our sales. I've got another example for you. What about the chemicals that you utilize in your facility? Whether it's cleaning products or chemistry that goes into the process or chemistry that actually makes up the product that you produce, how do we avoid having those chemicals? How do we minimize the risk there? We know that a lot of chemicals, certainly we've got safety sheets that tell us that they have a safety risk to our employees, and we are very cautious with those. But it means that it takes a little bit of extra tracking and time and PPE potentially because of that safety risk. So it also means that we have expensive disposal for that product. And as we might find over time, we get new environmental regulations that roll out. We may be unprepared for those new regulations. So these are all risks that we face by not evaluating and reconsidering what chemistry we have on site. It may also be that eventually our marketability isn't as good as people become more and more invested and interested and asking questions about what's included in the things that they're purchasing. We might find that some people say, "Ooh, I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't really want to buy that. I'm going to find somebody that's doing it in a more environmentally friendly way." So those are all risks if we just kind of don't evaluate those. Now, a great example of a company that took that to the opposite and said, we don't want those risks. In fact, we're going to design our entire business around beating out the people that refuse to make changes to their products. So this is a company that generated all eco-friendly cleaning products. They are absolutely safe to use. There's zero disposal costs because there's nothing hazardous. Very marketable. It's been incredibly fast growing. This company has done extremely well over the years. And so they're reaping the rewards. So by keeping in tune with what the market is looking for and what the trends are, they were able to jump in and take advantage, and they are now one of the fastest growing companies in the cleaning industry, which is awesome for them. Not so great for the companies that haven't made those changes to what's included in their products. So here's another local example. This is, again, a company here in Indiana, and they were starting to take a closer look at some of the chemistry usage that they had on site. So they first came up to us with an issue where they had some parts that were requiring some rework. And the issue was that they had material that was, the oil that they were using was causing some issues after it sat for about 2 weeks. So they were using what was called chlorinated paraffin drying oil. And as we started talking with them about this, what they also shared and we discovered was that they already knew that federal regulations were coming down the line that were going to make it harder to use this product. So unfortunately, they were kind of sitting on that information. They weren't really doing anything with it. They were going to wait until their hand was forced. So we said, well, let's investigate this because you're going to have to make the change sooner or later. Let's figure out how we can make that change. So we were able to find a water-based lubricant that they could use. And not only did it make it so that they were a step ahead and they could, relax a little bit about the regulation that was coming because they were already switched over, but they had 10 barrels a day that they were able to cut. And they ended up saving about 90,000 gallons per year because the new lubricant actually had a different viscosity and it worked differently and it worked better with the products that they were using. So if they had waited until the regulation required them to make the change, they would have continued to be losing money over and over and over. So by being a little bit proactive, they found a solution that saved them more money sooner, which is great. So the next one that I want to discuss is the risk of status quo. I know that this is common. A lot of companies live by the "that's the way we've always done it" kind of motto. And the problem with this is that we may be missing market trends. We see that there's a lot of change happening in a lot of different industries. And particularly younger buyers are more and more likely to be asking questions and to be passionate about sustainability. So in addition to younger buyers and others who are really interested in sustainability, we're losing some of that market share to competitors who are recognizing that and saying, ooh, let's change what we're doing. Let's start letting people know the cool stuff that we're doing in the world of sustainability, and we'll start to change our branding and reputation. So if we are stuck in the status quo, it also means that we may have an inability to recruit some of the talent that we're truly looking for, because who wants to work for a company that doesn't align with some of their values? If they're passionate about sustainability, you don't want to work for a company that is absolutely doing nothing in that world. So that is a key thing as well. So how do we talk about that? So the reward, of course, is to look at this and say, you know what, instead of just being status quo, if nobody else is really doing a lot in this area, in our particular industry, why don't we be a sustainability leader? Why don't we take the forefront and make a reputation for ourselves? And in so doing, we're going to be driving market trends instead of following them and lagging behind, which means that we're attracting those younger buyers and buyers who care about sustainability. And we're beating our competitors. And that means that we're also able to recruit and retain high quality new talent that we otherwise would have lost. So awesome rewards, especially when we talk again about what it means to be able to recruit and retain people in an area where labor is usually our number one cost. I want to share with you, there are so many great companies out there that are doing awesome stuff, but I really like the way that this quote lays it out for us, which is that basically anytime we buy something, we emit something, we dump it down the drain, or incinerate it or send it to the landfill, we paid for it. So we paid to bring it in, we purchased it, and then we paid to deal with it. What that is waste. That is just downright wasteful. And so that is really an essential part of sustainability, is saying, A, let's look at what we're doing and if there's an alternative, but B, how can we do what we're doing more efficiently? It's truly, in my mind, the next step of lean manufacturing is incorporating this mindset into what you're doing at your companies. So let's find a way to balance out that triple bottom line and imply that into all of the decisions and all of the projects that we're working towards. So as we wrap up, I just want to say that I'm really excited. I know that so many of you are doing so many great projects. And I want to just remind you that everything you do has a trickle-down effect. Even seemingly small projects can yield surprising results. So it can be easy to feel overwhelmed and not know if what we're doing is even making a difference. But I want to just remind you to get started today, that every little thing that we do is making a difference. So remember why you do the job that you do. And when you leave here today, I want you to remind yourself that any small step is going to make a positive impact. So whether you remember to turn off your computer monitor when you're done with the conference today, or bring your reusable coffee cup when you go get a coffee next time, or talk to your company about finding a way to implement and explore and discover new sustainability projects that will not only yield cost savings, but also all of these other awesome environmental and people, planet, and profit benefits. So with that, I just want to thank you very much for having me here today. It's been truly my pleasure, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. If anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, or you can also reach out to me, and thank you very much.